Hey everyone, welcome to My Rising Rose, where we channel dragons and goddesses and open our minds into the multi-dimensional layers of the cosmos, while remaining grounded and ordinary in our human lives and learning how to navigate all the inevitable ups and downs and the emotions of being human, especially at this time in human history. Today, to be honest, I'm not totally sure what I'm going to be talking about, but I can feel that there's something inside that wants to come through, and I can see and feel that that's already happening. So whenever I sit down to do a talk like this, the words aren't really that important. What's important is the energy that's coming through. And what I'm experiencing as I say these words is a flow of spirit and an expansion of consciousness, which is transmitted. So as you're listening to these words, there is a transmission that is coming from me to you. And that transmission, all it is a remembrance. It's a remembrance of who we are. It's a remembrance of who we have always been. So when someone steps into the role as a spiritual teacher, usually what happens, if it's real, is that there will be this natural sharing of spiritual insight, that the teacher has developed some kind of spiritual insight and that is then passed from one person to another. And that's what spiritual lineages are all about. That's why there are these revered spiritual lineage, like the Dalai Lama, for example, is part of a spiritual lineage that you can follow back, and you can look at all the different teachers who are part of that lineage, because there was a teacher who was passing their level or their insights of consciousness to their students, who would then eventually, when they reached a certain level of maturity, be invited to teach by that teacher, and then it would continue. And that's what the spiritual lineages of the world are really all about. And that's an important topic, because there are a lot of people out there who are taking on the role of being a spiritual teacher before they're ready to do that. So before they've reached a level of spiritual maturity, but in my opinion, much more importantly, a level of emotional maturity, where they're able to actually handle being in this role. Because there are a lot of temptations out there in taking on this role, and it can get really messy really quickly. Unless you're pretty grounded in yourself, you've got good people around you checking in on you and who you can talk to. You've got a decent amount of self-awareness of your own shadows, and you know the ways that you can kind of distort the messages that are coming through you. In my opinion, all those things are really essential. And that's not to say that we need to reach some kind of state of perfection. I'm certainly not claiming to be in that state of perfection. I have lots of flaws and challenges and things that I work on and things that I talk to people who I'm close to about, I share with my partner, and I have friends around me who are also either in this role or kind of similar roles who I talk to. And can be open and honest with about what's coming up for me, and receive their guidance on. But yeah, there are a lot of people who are rushing into this role, and that's how I used to be. Like when I first started having awakening experiences, I had I went from being an atheist to suddenly having these spiritual insights, then realizing that not many people were having these insights, and I hadn't done any work on my shadows, so subconsciously I just saw this as a way to get my unmet needs, my unmet childhood needs met through the spiritual awareness that was coming up in me. It's like, oh, okay, now I can be somebody. Now I can be important. Now I can have power over people. Now I can make people do what I want. I wasn't kind of consciously thinking that kind of stuff, but it was there. It was there as an energy, and it was there in my thoughts, but just kind of manifest in different ways. You know, it's totally fine to have shadows, like we all have shadows. But in my opinion, if you're going to be in a spiritual teacher role, you do need to have good awareness of what your shadows are. I absolutely did not have that. And then I had a Kundalini awakening and started experiencing out-of-body experiences, meeting angels, talking with deities, you know, all of this stuff that's, first of all, it's really out there, so it was confusing, and energetically it was doing a lot to my system that my body was unfamiliar with, so that was very intense. But then on the kind of the spiritual ego side of things, it's like, okay, well, this is my opportunity to kind of make it and be big and important. And I saw my teacher, who was really respected and getting a lot of attention, and I was like, okay, I just want to be that. So yeah, I really looked up to her and wanted to be like her. But she knew that I was absolutely not ready for that I was actually more in some type of spiritual crisis than I was ready to start teaching people. She knew that I had genuine insights and that I was going through a real awakening, and she told me that, but she also saw that I absolutely was not ready to teach, and she completely did not encourage me to do that, and instead of burst my bubble. And that was a painful experience. Like, I did not want to be told that I should be in therapy, you know, that I should seek out a therapist. I wanted to be told that I'm perfect and fixed, and now I can go on to fix other people. But therapy is what I needed, and it was very helpful, and then it started to help me to understand my shadows on it a bit better. And that just only continued over time. You know, that was about 10 years ago, I think, that I had that conversation with Fran. And then as time has gone on, I had to learn more and more, you know. And for me, I learned a lot through relationships. That was my primary way, rather than kind of sitting and training, though I did go through a counseling foundation training, which was also very helpful, in like being in a group of people, unearthing all of these personal issues that we struggle with. So for me, like, most of my awakening journey hasn't actually been about spirit so much as it's been about maturing as a human being. That's the main thing that I've been working on for the last 10 years or so. And that the spiritual stuff has been continuing. You know, that's been going on. It's always been there, and it evolves, and it expands, and kind of reshapes itself in different ways. But for me, my primary focus has actually been on my humanity, not on so much on my spirit dimension. I'm just going to take a moment just to allow some energies to move through. So as I'm speaking, I'm giving transmissions, you know, as I was saying before. So yeah, there's an intellectual level to what I'm talking about here, but there's a direct spiritual transmission as well. So that's more like the light of being shining through my body, and even within the kind of energetic texture of my words, there's this reverberation of spirit. And even as I'm sharing this, you know, because we're on this topic, I'm like, oh yeah, be careful of the ego. I can feel my spiritual ego, the part of me that's like, oh yeah, that makes me really special. That makes me really special, you know? I'm important. I'm the important one, sat on a pedestal, shining the light to other people, you know? And so I still feel that part in me, and it's not like it's completely gone away. And what I want to do, what I'm committed to doing throughout my whole time teaching, is to actually be honest about this, to be as honest as I can with all of these topics, just to show that I'm an ordinary human being and that I have an ego, and these parts of me that want to cling on to things, you know, like that I want social status and prestige and importance, and I want to be looked at and respected and adored and all of that, you know, like that's part of me. And I think that there's like a shadow and light to that. I think that anything within our ego, if you kind of clean it up a little bit, there's a kind of spark of truth in it, in the sense that, okay, it's completely natural to want to be respected, you know. I think the difference between the kind of healthy way of experiencing these things and the unhealthy way is like what I'm doing with my hand, right? So like, if in myself I feel this tightness and constriction, I know that that's where I'm trying to grip hold of something, because I think that that thing is necessary for my happiness, that my being isn't enough. I need that thing. Whereas if it's like this, then it's more of a, I like that thing feels good for me, and also more like I can allow it to come and go. I can allow it to come and go. Don't have to cling on to it really tightly. And oftentimes, you know, it takes some practice to tune into that in ourselves and get familiar with our own unique kind of like egoic signature, like the things that we really think we really need, and then the things that we feel very comfortable with. Like, we can learn more and more about ourselves and how we fit into that. And if we're having trouble finding that in ourselves, we can see it through our actions and our reactions to situations. Like, if we have a really strong emotional kind of outburst about something, it's because on some level somewhere we're clinging to something as if it is necessary for our happiness, and we're having difficulty letting go of it. And usually what's happening is that something is coming in and questioning this grip and being like, maybe you'd be better off not gripping hold of that thing. And then it lashes out. It's like, no, this thing is absolutely essential. I absolutely must have this thing. And within our psyches, you know, it generally isn't going to be as clear as that. It'll be something more distorted. We're very good at deceiving ourselves. So we will usually convince ourselves that the other person is bad and wrong. You know, actually, if they're accusing us of something, actually, no, they are the one that does the thing that they are saying that we are doing. You know, there's all sorts of egoic defense mechanisms, psychological defense mechanisms that we all have, and to some extent those things are understandable and necessary to a point, because it can be quite intense and psychologically demanding to start to unravel these knots, these ways that we cling on to things. Can cause like an unraveling of how we perceive ourselves and who we are in the world, like what role we have. And that there are so many of these different knots within our bodies that as one starts to move, it has an effect on the other ones. So like there's this kind of cascade effect. So it would be very, very overwhelming if all of those knots suddenly came undone, for example. That's one of the things that the dragons have said when I've channeled them in the past, that it would be completely inappropriate, even if they had the power to enlighten or, massively open the awareness of all human beings on the planet. That would actually be a terrible thing to do, because the bodies and minds of the people would not be ready for that level of information, and it'd be a catastrophic event. So it needs to be something that's slow and gradual and peaceful and unfurling in its own way, which is why the symbol of the rose is given. The unfurling of the rose, that it's closed like a constricted energetic knot. But those constricted energetic knots, as they start to open and unfurl, they become like these beautiful flowers. So these constrictions that we hold inside of our bodies, the way our ego kind of grips hold of things, it's actually those very things that are which hold the potential of the most beautiful and amazing things within us. Our soul's quest, really, our soul's wish to fulfill in this lifetime is found in those knots. But having that unravel is painful and difficult, and I experienced that when my teacher told me that I wasn't ready to teach, and then I kind of let go of that dream. It was still there, like I still felt like it was who I was supposed to be, but I was just too absorbed in other things in my life. I was going through a very difficult and intense relationship, which was really necessary to mature me in many ways. So I was going through that, and then that was really my focus, and it really went into the background, the whole idea of becoming a spiritual teacher. It was only after that relationship ended and I started getting these signs that it was time to actually step into this role. It wasn't something that I was planning. It felt more like something that I was being led into. And I had been encouraged to start doing energy work by a woman that I had been seeing for energy healing, and she had, I think, 14 or 15 years of experience, so she was very experienced, and she was encouraging me to start up my own practice. I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want the exposure. I didn't know how to do that. It all felt too much, but then the circumstances in my life demanded that I do it. And there was this kind of impulse in me where I felt I had to. My life didn't feel complete without doing this kind of work. So that eventually led to me doing my first interview, which was terrifying. I was really, really frightened of talking about this stuff publicly for the first time. And it was also rewarding, though. And over time, I started to get used to doing interviews and started to really enjoy them. I've got one coming up next week. And it's funny, I just don't feel anxious about that anymore. It's just something either ordinary or exciting. I like talking about it. And I've really found my role now. It's taken a while, but I've found my role, and something in me has kind of become peaceful. It's like I always knew that this was who I was supposed to be, but it's just taken a long time to get here. And when I would see other people in that role, as spiritual teachers, I could be really, really critical. If I was the person in the audience, and I still can be, but especially so before I started doing this myself. And I think the reason for that, and I was talking to my partner about this as well, and she was saying this, it's like we know who we're supposed to be. And when we see somebody else doing it, it kind of touches on a wound because we're not there yet and we wish we were. And then we want to, or at least I have wanted to dethrone some spiritual teachers who I come across because I'm like, it hurts my ego, you know? It's like, I wish I was there instead of them. And again, with all of this shadow stuff, there's a healthy part of it and an unhealthy part. So the unhealthy part is just like it being purely egoic, and it's just like, you know, I'm going to character assassinate this person simply because they are in the role that I wish I was in. And then there's another side of it, which is actually that we live in a very strange kind of spiritual system where anybody can put themselves forward and make all sorts of incredibly radical claims and charge huge amounts of money for that. And there's little kind of scrutiny or checks and balances connected to that. So that's something that I feel, for whatever reason, I've got quite a good instinct on, kind of where people are at. I mean, one of the reasons is like, because of the awakening experiences that I've had, I can literally see and feel the level of awakening inside of someone. It's hard to put that into words, but like I can sense the spaciousness and the quality of energy shining out of people. And sometimes there are these people who are, you know, really put on pedestals, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, I don't feel anything. Like I feel this person is talking completely on an intellectual level and they haven't realized much, or if anything. And then the other side of that is that I come in contact with people who aren't even doing any kind of spiritual teaching work, who I meet, and within the first minute or two, I'm like, I can feel like this person is really, really tuned in. Like they really know what they're talking about, and I should be listening to them. There's a lot that I can receive from this person, you know. So people don't need to have like the kind of, they don't need to look like the role in order to actually be really genuinely deeply awake. This can be really confusing when you're coming into spirituality initially. It can be confusing for years, but like especially initially, because once we start having awakening experiences, usually what's happening is that something really foundational in our belief system is being questioned and let go of. And that's wonderful, and it's really necessary, and it can cause all sorts of like openings and relief to our psyche, and it's like, oh, thank God, like there's so much more to life than I thought, like this is so much better. But it also leaves us susceptible and vulnerable, because we're in a state of questioning things. So if someone comes into that state and they've got a lot of authority, or they're just manipulative, they can take us to some really unpleasant places and use us and take a lot from us, and it can take a long time to recover from that. And you know, there's cults all over the world that are like that, and in my opinion, there's people who are seemingly respected spiritual teachers around the world who are doing exactly that. So it's something that we all need to be aware of and have a mature conversation about, and talk about kind of credibility and authenticity, like how credible and authentic are people. And for me, like a big red flag is if there's a spiritual teacher and they're acting like they're done, or that they're perfect, or they're not talking about their own experience, their own human experience, their own human weaknesses and difficulties. Like if they're just acting like they've found the secret sauce and now they're going to sell it to you, big red flags coming up for me. For me, I really want to get to know like the level of emotional maturity of people and get an understanding of that. You know, how much do they know their shadows, how much do they integrate that, you know, how deep have they gone into their own underworld, and how much of the horror of human potential have they found, and how much are they able to talk about that. Like even myself now, like I'm not talking about some of the deeper, darker parts that I've found in myself and that I see in everyone, because I'm aware that for a lot of people it's too much, and that there's so much judgment of the shadow that I'm cautious in revealing my own. And I think what I just expressed there is kind of the fundamental issue in spiritual teaching, and that is that every teacher has a shadow, and that many do not feel safe to express it, even if they've found it, because there's a fear of being rejected by you for having it. Because most of us spend our entire lives running away from our shadows. And if someone comes along who goes, look, this is the shadow, for a lot of people, the instinctive response will be, well, that's your shadow, it's not mine. That doesn't have anything to do with me. No way. Get away from that. No, that's you. You're the bad one. I'm not the bad one. I'm the good one. You know? And that can get really ugly. So I see that in myself. I see this caution, like, okay, I'm not going to reveal my shadow in case I just get attacked for having it, even though that's insane, because we all have that, but it is what it is. So if you want to hear more about my shadow, let me know. If the comments suddenly become filled with people talking about their own shadows and inviting me to talk about mine, I'll do videos on it. You know, I would love to go there. I'd really love to go there. My senses, I don't know. I don't know if it's the right time. But I long for the day when we can all just be genuine, myself included, when we can just openly express everything that's inside us in healthy and mature ways, and we don't have to run from our shadows anymore. One day. I don't think it's today, but one day. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you listening to what's inside of me. It's very present for me at the moment. And I just remain dedicated to being authentic and sharing with you all what's going on inside of me, while also sharing, you know, the more kind of mystical stuff with, you know, the dragons and the goddesses and all that. And, you know, the light that is shining right now. You know, even talking about the shadows and the darker side of life and the underworld and all of that stuff. If you're sensitive, you can feel that this light's been shining the whole time. And why did we incarnate as human beings if not to bring the light into the deepest parts of humanity? Why? Why are we here? Is there not, like, what more noble cause is there than to illuminate the depths of humanity while we're incarnate here? Maybe that's just me as a Scorpio speaking.